I kind of stumbled upon his videos before he ever even reached out, I think. I just kind of saw it somewhere. I think I saw an ad for a reed company in Endorse, and I went, who's that guy? And I clicked through the YouTube wormhole and found it. I was like, this is really cool, and showed my kids. And so it was kind of crazy when I think Paul sent an email you sent to him to me or something like that, and it kind of worked out. And so we're happy to have you. I think what's really cool about what you're doing is that you're embracing kind of extended technique stuff, finding your niche in music making in the 21st century, and finding a career like inside of that that's sustainable and can like be a living kind of livelihood. So I think that's really valuable for students to see. So we're happy to have you, Derek Crandall.
Thanks. Thank you. All right, I'm going to get started. I'm going to play a tune, and then we'll chat. Yeah. This is one that I wrote, I guess, probably 5 years ago. That was the first tune that I ever put on my YouTube channel that kind of started the ball rolling for all this stuff. I call it Catch 'em Up, with a little bit of improv. So that is what I call, for lack of a better word, Beatbox Sax. But the dirty little secret that I have is that, if you don't, promise not to tell anybody, my secret is I don't actually beatbox. You know, like the vocal beatboxing. Boom, 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 pow. That's all I got with that. So I was never, because usually the number one question people ask me is, how did you start to, combine beatboxing and saxophone? What made you think of combining those two? And I was never like a beatboxer, and I was never like, I wonder if I can combine the two loves of my life, beatboxing and saxophone. So it was never like that, and instead it was just this kind of slow evolution of kind of doing kind of the standard classical first, and then jazz education. I went to school and grad school for both, and tried to have pretty open ears and would just hear different sounds from different arenas and would just kind of sit with some of these sounds and try to explore and see if I could kind of use them in my own way. And before I tell my story, because I want to kind of talk about some like entrepreneurship things, I want to say this one, I guess, quote that I like to kind of start things out with. And it goes like this. To make it in the 21st century as a musician, this day and age that we live in, I think it's the best of times and it's the worst of times to be a performing musician. And I say that because it is the best of times in so many ways, because we have, this amazing technology at our fingertips. Things like YouTube, Facebook, social media, things that didn't exist decades ago, that it's so easy to use, it's free to use, and it's possible for you to record something and for that to be seen by almost everybody in the world immediately. Like, that's crazy power that did not exist, even 15 years ago. So that is the best of times. Also, with things like recording technology, every year stuff gets cheaper and cheaper and better and better. Yes, you can always spend thousands and thousands of dollars to do anything that you like, but man, microphones and recording software have gotten so cheap. I mean, if you spend like $150, you're on a microphone, you're going to get a good microphone. And that's the secret. Like, I'll have some of my CDs available for sale tonight at 7:30, right? Correct. Not 7. I was wrong about that. So 7:30. Sorry about that, Paul. So I have these 2 CDs that I made, and both of them I actually made in my bedroom with a free recording program. Can you guess what I used that was free? I mean, it came with my Mac computer. GarageBand. I made 2 albums with that, and that's, like I said, you can expend so much more, but man, GarageBand is great. It can do great things. I used a $150 Studio Projects microphone. I used a $150 audio interface, and that was it. I borrowed a microphone to have a couple mics. So it's actually possible to make really high quality stuff really cheap, which means you can actually make money selling those, like at gigs. Now, I said it's the best of times, but I also said there's a flip side of that coin. It's the worst of times, in the sense that because that recording technology is so cheap, so easy to use, I mean, it comes with every MacBook computer. Everybody is using it. Everybody's recording stuff. It's not a big deal to have an album anymore. It's like I heard people say it's like a business card today. That's what an album is, that you're practically giving out. And the same thing with the internet technology, with things like YouTube. It's so easy to use, it's free to use, that everybody is using it. So everybody's making videos, everybody's putting out stuff. It is so oversaturated with music. And you could say it's oversaturated with all these crappy stupid cat videos. But there's really good music out there. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. And so I think the question, at least for me, the $1 million question has been, what is going to make me get noticed out there? What's going to make me unique? What is it that I have to say out in this world? And that's not an easy question to answer. And truth be told, if this Beatbox Sax style, or whatever you want to call it, if that's my voice, I didn't really find that until I was 30 years old. I'm 35 right now. And really, when I was in undergrad, and I went straight to grad school, I went to University of Cincinnati, I kind of almost completely burnt out in grad school. I was doing a jazz studies degree, and I kind of had this, I kind of joke about being this midlife crisis where I was this GA, second year GA, and I remember I was in charge of this one combo that had a bunch of undergrads. And there was a freshman punk sax student who, when I heard him play, I'm not joking, he was twice as good as me. And he was a freshman. I was a second year grad student at traditional jazz. And that will do a number to you. When that is what my life was. I was, trying to be a jazz musician. And this guy was just hands down better than me. And I kind of had this moment, why am I playing this thing? What am I trying to say on this? That, he's just going to be able to do anything I can do, better than me. And that was, that was part of the reason of that is because we get caught into this idea of what we all need to be of, a lot of us are trying to be like John Coltrane clones, Sonny Rollins clones. And first of all, we'll never be as good as the original because we don't have their experiences, we're not them. But also there's like 1,000 other sax, more than that. There's like 1,000 at just UNT, North Texas, that are also trying to be John Coltrane clones. And I guarantee there's always going to be someone that's practicing more than you and is more obsessive about it. I'll get back to practicing. But so that was a big thing of just kind of come to Jesus moment of like, if I'm going to play this thing, it's got to really be what I want to do. It's got to be kind of as cliche as it sounds, but like what's really in me. I've got to like feel this stuff and be passionate about it if I'm really going to do it. And I had no idea how much work it would take being out in the real world. It's been fun work, but it's been a lot of work. And if I wasn't passionate about it, or if I was trying to pretend I was someone else, there's no way I would have made this. So now backing up a little bit, in graduate school, even though I was struggling with kind of my identity as a player, what made me unique and whatnot, I was trying to have really open ears. And I was just trying to explore different sounds. Sometimes when I even felt like I shouldn't have been, like I was listening to, traditional Scottish music when I probably was supposed to be listening more to my Charlie Parker stuff, but I'm glad that I had a period where I listened to the really traditional stuff, because you gotta dive deep to learn that language, and then you want to explore. So anyways, I remember hearing some interesting sounds, and I remember the first interesting sound that I heard that really grabbed my attention was actually from free jazz, and I remember hearing a sax player play something like this. And if you know free jazz, that went on for like 3 hours in a solo concert. But there's a lot there, and I will admit I'm not the biggest free jazz fan, but I do believe that we can really learn from any genre of music, whether that's kind of the higher art forms of classical and jazz, or even pop music. Like I think we can learn a lot from country western music. So much. Well, let me put it this way: can you guys agree that music is like a language? It's a form of a communication, right? We're trying to communicate to an audience. If that's true, we need to think about the people we're communicating to. We don't need to dumb anything down, but we just got to put ourselves in their shoes and think: is what I'm trying to say, is that connecting with people? And then also realizing that every little thing we do, from how we dress, to how we stand, to how we talk or how we don't talk, to what we play, all that stuff communicates something. And I think, regardless of what you think about country, western music, or pop music, they are connecting with a lot of people. They're communicating effectively with a lot of people. It might not be in a way that you want to connect or communicate. It might not be with the type of people you want to connect with. It might not be the thing you want to say. But they're doing something right. They're being effective with that. And so I think we can learn from all that stuff. And just, the more you can think about, and universities are kind of just not known. I'm glad you guys have, what was that class you said?
Music as a profession.
Music as a profession, that's amazing. So many schools don't have anything like that, because schools are notorious for just teaching you your craft, but then just sending you out in the world with no idea what to do with that. It's kind of like you're working on how to construct, words and phrases, but you're never thinking about how to actually make a speech that's going to affect different types of people. You got to think about that stuff. And doing this full-time, performing full-time, that is on my mind all the time. That's kind of the number one thing, connecting with audiences. What am I trying to say? How can I take the audience with me? Reviewing a concert and think, that wasn't really effective there, or why did that not work? And thinking about that stuff. So I can't stress that enough. So we can learn from any genre of music. And I remember in that instance of free jazz, hearing particularly that percussive sound and being really intrigued by that. And so after asking around, and who's in here is a sax player? Okay, great. Paul. One of the best. Yeah. And so, okay, cool. And what do you play?
Trombone.
Okay, cool. So that sound, that percussive sound, is actually a pretty simple sound I'm doing. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing that you'll hear like tonight is based around slap tonguing and getting a suction with your tongue. That is not that though. That sound that I was doing. And those of you sax players, you can try this on your own. But I'm basically just going. Just everybody do that with me. And notice how you can feel the air just really tense behind your lips, and then you just explode it out. And to explode it out on here, the key thing is when you do that, no tongue at all, just biting extra hard to close off the ear, I'm dropping the jaw. And that feels wrong as a sax player. It is wrong, unless you're trying to make this sound. And so I'm going, I'm really releasing that reed. And one other way you can practice this is if you just play a note, like a C sharp, crescendo it as loud as you can, and then drop your jaw at the end of that. You hear how the tone kind of splits out? If you do that and then you shorten it over and over, you keep shortening it and just focus on that last split second of sound. That's where you can get that kind of almost pitch-less sound. So, and then it kind of becomes percussive. So that's the way you can experiment with that. Also, and all the techniques that I use, I have this on my YouTube channel, Beatbox Sax. I have a whole series of tutorial things. I have about close to 40 videos now. Every technique that I'm doing, those I just call pops. So you can check those out. Because like today, I'm not going to be able to teach you slap tonguing. That took me a year to learn. I wish I could teach that in 20 minutes, but it's not going to happen. But there's tons of videos out there. So that first one, I learned how to make that sound. That was pretty cool. And to me, it kind of sounded like, a snare drum. It reminded me of a percussive thing. And I remember at one point, after experimenting with it, first of all, I was kind of experimenting as, like I heard it, as like a little sound effect, and then moving on to other things. But then I remember thinking like, man, a lot of the music I listen to, it's either like funky or it just has this big backbeat on 2 and 4. And this is a theme that I keep coming back to, this idea of I'm maybe studying one thing, like very traditional jazz or traditional classical music. But a lot of times I'll take these techniques, these tools, and I'll incorporate it into something else. And a lot of times what I incorporate it into is this music that's like, that I talked about, like that's deep down inside of me. And this music, have you guys ever heard of the idea that the music you listen to when you're like 14, 15 will stay with you your whole life? It's so true. So if you listened to, Britney Spears, like, good luck trying to get rid of her. She's coming with you wherever you go the rest of your life. And so you might as well embrace Britney. Go to Vegas, go see her once a year. And so for me, I listen to a lot of kind of like a lot of people consider like cheesy 80s music, like power ballads. I'm talking like Bryan Adams, or getting into like Tears for Fears, if anyone knows Michael W. Smith. It's like heavy reverb, heavy synth, maybe kind of sappy love lyrics. And as much as I have tried in my life to move away from that, like I get into jazz, I get into Coltrane, I start with Blue Train, I start to try to like, his later free stuff, I'll admit, nothing gets me going like that. Some power ballad 80s song. And speaking of Coltrane, I still am a Blue Train guy, as much as I've tried to get into that stuff. And more I realize that's okay. You gotta realize what makes you tick. And that's what connects with people. People can tell when you really love something, when you're passionate about something, versus when you're faking it. And so, more and more, I've realized that one of the ways that you can kind of find your voice is when you do that thing where you take these new tools, you're learning these new languages, dive fully into these, these art forms that you're doing. But then when you start to apply them in different ways, and you apply it into the way that makes you really tick. Steve Jobs defines creativity as simply connecting things. That's all it is. It's not that you're making up some new technique that's never been done before. It's that you hear somebody else, a guitar player, do something, and then you steal that idea and try it here. Or you hear something from a different genre, or from a vocalist, and then you apply it here, and then soon enough you do that, that is your creativity. That's something new. So always keep your eyes open, ears open. You never know what you'll learn from. So I had that percussive sound, and so I remember thinking, I wonder if I could do like a backbeat. This wasn't extremely like traditional jazz like, but I was thinking like funk music. And so on 2 and 4, so what if I play regular notes and then alternate with that backbeat? So and so forth. Now, and of course I started way slower than that, just really slow, painfully slow. But then, it's kind of cool. Oh, this is kind of fun. Now, do you think at that point I was like, oh my gosh, I found my voice. I'm going to do solo concerts around the world. I'll visit Cal State Bakersfield. No, I wouldn't have thought that that was possible. Hey, I wouldn't have thought that that was possible, either physically or just creatively. Like, I don't see how you could do a whole concert of that. But it was a starting point, and it was something fun and something challenging. And when you guys get out of school here, you're in a really special place where you have these mentors, these teachers that are giving you assignments every week. And so you have a reason to practice because you got to play for the teacher. You're in these amazing ensembles at school with other amazing musicians, and you have concerts coming up, so you got to practice. But wow, when you get out of these school walls, everything just stops, and it's all up to you if you're going to keep going. And the vast majority of people don't. The vast majority, I would say, of music, especially performers, don't. They move on to something else because it's tough. And because you got to find ways to stay passionate about it. And what are ways? For me, there's 3 things that I'm all about in my career right now. And I've been doing this full time for now 5 years. For me, it's all about, first of all, it has to be healthy, safe. So I have to actually get sleep. I have to remember the things that my teachers told me about, like breathing from the diaphragm correctly, not playing with any tension. I know some friends who've had to stop playing because of those things get in the way. So safety, keep it healthy. Number 2, it's got to be fun. Remember the reason you got into music was because it's fun. And yes, there's always parts of jobs that aren't fun, but always look for new ways to make it fun, whether that's, playing a different instrument or with different people or a different type of place or a different type of music. And then number 3 is keep it challenging. So if it ever gets too easy for too long, you're going to lose interest. If you have some gig that's really easy, find another gig that's challenging. If you have some kind of, you play in wedding gigs and that's easy, start a jazz trio. Even if you're playing for tips, that's going to keep it fun. That's going to keep it challenging. Then you can do it the long haul. And the secret to this is the one guaranteed way of success in the music industry, I think. It's guaranteed. It's just outlast everybody. That's it. And which, on one hand, sounds a little too simple, but it's really that simple. Where, and I noticed this in the Chicago scene. I'm not sure if this is everywhere, but in Chicago, where I was the last 5 years, I noticed there were a lot of 20-year-olds, a lot of 20-somethings, fresh out of school. They got lots of energy. They're going to all the jam sessions. They're going to all each other's gigs. They're also kind of like, they're hanging out late. They're sleeping on each other's couches, just trying to make it ends meet. Yep. But then I noticed there's kind of a gap. Not so many 30-year-olds, not as many 4-year-olds. And then there's kind of an older generation of the guys who made it. And they're the ones that they knew how to sustain it. They figured out a way to sustain it for them. And so, it's if you can find ways to sustain it, to keep staying passionate about it, and it's not easy. To have those consistent practices, those consistent routines, but finding new ways to spice it up, you will make it if you can outlast it. But we're talking many, many years that you'll make it. And it's just science that if you just stick around long enough, people will start to know who you are, and other people are going to fall by the wayside, and you'll actually be there. Where was I? Okay. So back to my story here. So I had this percussive sound. It was just something fun and challenging to do. And it wasn't until maybe a couple years later when I heard another sound, this time from a completely different genre, this time from contemporary classical saxophone. And I heard something that sounded like this. All right. So, and that is called what, sax players? The trombone player, or trumpet player, we play trumpet, right? He knows. Slap tonguing. That is slap tonguing. And yeah, in the classical field, you hear that all over the place. And slap tonguing's been around over 100 years, I think. In the jazz world, it's not very common. Same thing about a lot of these extended techniques, like double tonguing. And anyways, I remember hearing that, and once again, my ears were open, like, what is that? That's amazing. That sounds awesome. I have to learn how to do that. And that is a hard technique. I wish it was as easy as those pops that I did. Anyone able to slap tongue here?
Yeah,
A little bit?
I can
Okay.
kind of do it.
Yeah, it's tough. And my best advice is to kind of check out multiple videos of people explaining it.
I've heard Jeff Coffin do it a lot.
Okay.
So, and you, honestly.
Yeah. And the key thing is just listen to how people describe what you're doing with your tongue, because something someone will say is going to make sense.
Yeah, that's what I've learned from a lot of other techniques that I have. Is like other people will say, "Oh, do this," and now somebody will say, "Do something else," and that makes more sense, even though they both technically could be correct.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I have on my YouTube channel kind of a 3-step process. I have a couple of videos, starting with just the reed, trying to get a suction with your tongue just by making the shape. And then if you can get just a little bit of that, and that should take about a week, then you put on the mouthpiece, and then can you get that suction there? And then it takes just months of learning to use less and less tongue to get that suction. And months of learning, being able to make a stronger and stronger suction. Because when you're really doing it correctly, this slap tonguing, you can actually do it. You can make sound without actually breathing at all. It's just the strength of the tongue. And so, like at my concert tonight, you'll notice some spots where I'll be playing a note, and you'll see me breathing through my nose. So like this. Because it's all the strength of my tongue making that suction, and then all you're hearing is the sound of that reed thunk, 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 slapping against that mouthpiece when I release. It's kind of like you're hearing this. It sounds very similar, tapping my finger. You can also do that with that open. We have closed and open slap. We could talk about this for days. But yeah, so finally I learned how to slap tongue after about a year, giving up, starting, false starts, retrying. Finally learned how to slap tongue. And to me, when I heard the low end of the sax, doing the slap tongue, to me, once again, I think it's going back to that music that really makes me tick. 80s music, and maybe more on the funk side. Music that has this or it sounded like a slap, like an electric bass slapping the strings. Down, bow, 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 slapping the string. And so I remember thinking at one point, oh man, I could kind of do bass line stuff with this. And then I have this percussive sound. I could do kind of drum kind of things. Yeah, drum and bass. And actually, the first kind of music I tried with this was, I was in a duo, just a guitar and me. And if you've ever seen a jazz duo, of course, when the sax player or the trumpet player is improvising, playing the melody, this is an obvious question, what is the guitar player or piano player doing? They're comping, they're playing the chords. They're playing the bass line, they're, accompanying, all that stuff. And however, what about when the roles switch? Now it is the piano's time for a solo. What does the sax player do in that jazz duo? Sit and watch. That's the nicer way to put it. Other people say go out for a smoke, get a drink at the bar, texting their friend. Things you shouldn't do at the bandstand. And I wasn't satisfied with that. It was man, they're playing all the time, interacting with me. Why can't I interact with that solo? And then I kind of realized this was kind of the first time I started thinking more or less outside of the box, where it's this is, okay, it's a monophonic instrument, mono, one phonic sound. Only one sound at a time, yet, and it's known for doing melodies, yet I'm learning these new tools that kind of sound like rhythm section things. Maybe I could do rhythm section. And in this duo, we were heavily influenced by Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, kind of bluegrass, world, funk stuff. And so we were doing a lot of bluegrass stuff, and I started doing this, behind his solos, the bass, kind of cheesy now, but it was really fun. And I noticed the guitar player really loved it when I did that, because it freed him up. He didn't have to play all the bass notes. he didn't have to keep the obvious percussive stuff going. And I noticed it was kind of connecting with people in a way, maybe in kind of a flashy or different way, but it was kind of fun. And still I wasn't dreaming of doing solo sax concerts until I heard one other musician. And this truly is now outside of the saxophone. It was actually a vocalist. Any guesses who? Who?
Bobby McFerrin.
Yeah. And that's often the way I describe my music. I say it's like Bobby McFerrin on the saxophone. So if you haven't heard of Bobby McFerrin, check him out. And particularly check out what I'm referring to as his solo stuff, where he'll be solo live, one dude in a microphone on a stage, in a full concert audience. No electronics here, because there's amazing stuff with looping going on, But I've been more kind of right now into just like what can you do with the acoustic body or saxophone. So no electronics. You listen to him do these solo pieces, and you're like, man, I hear multiple singers. What's going on? I'm hearing multiple parts at the same time. And I noticed him doing three things. One, I noticed him, he's kind of beating on his chest, doing this like body percussion. So that's number one. Number two, he'll sing these like low bass lines. Do-do, 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 do. And number three is what he did with the melody, because like the saxophone, the voice is monophonic, so you can't just sing a melody and a bass line at the same time, unless you're a tube and throat singer. You kind of do that. But so it's like, how can you do that? Well, there's little gaps in between those bass notes. Do-do, do-do, do-do. And so he realized, he could sing the melody in between those gaps. And not just right around the same range, but what if he jumps way up? And Bobby has this amazingly accurate and pure falsetto voice. And so it exaggerates that difference, and it kind of makes it sound like it's a completely different voice. Like it's a soprano singer and a bass doing a duet together. So it's like, do-do, and I can't do it. It's a terrible example, but that was one of the better times I've ever. So three different things at the same time: percussion, rhythm, melody, all with one monophonic instrument. And so I was just like amazed by this, and I was wondering, I wonder if I could do this on the sax. And so I remember first taking just a tune that was in my head at the time, Tenor Madness, B-flat blues, and so starting with the melody. And I'll stop there, and then I wanted to see, okay, how can I add percussion? So I'm going to use those pop sounds on 2 and 4. And what was the third thing? A bass line. So here now I'm going to use that slap tonguing technique. And you don't have to technically slap out the bass note, but for me, it makes it easier to kind of make these giant leaps. If you can slap that note. Also just gives it a different kind of a punch. So I'm gonna do. Here's of course where it gets tricky as a monophonic instrument, because you can't line up the melody and the bass. So you got to make sure they're at different times. On this jazz tune, it works well because most of the melody's on the upbeats, and it leaves these short little eighth note gaps where I can hit a nice fat slap tongue note on the root on the downbeat. So that's like this one. So could you hear those three things? Okay. Now, one thing I want to make sure is very clear. I see some of you are smiling or like, oh yeah, really easy, Derek, right? And of course, do you think when I saw Bobby sing, and I was like, I wonder if I could do those three things with a tune. Let's see. What could I do? Tenor Madness. Let's see. B-flat blues. So let's see. Oh yeah, that'll work. Okay, what else could I do? Yeah, of course not. And here's where you guys know the drill with this, is that we spend hours and hours and hours and days and years in practice rooms by ourselves working on this stuff, painfully slow for painfully long, so that we get out on stage and we make it look easy. And the truth is, when I am on stage doing this stuff, when I'm going, the truth is, and I'm not bragging, that is easy for me. That's really easy. Like, too easy. You know why it's easy? Is it easy because I can just think of many things at the same time? Heck no. I'm extremely slow at that. Is it easy because I have a good memory? Heck no. It's easy, it's really easy, because I spend so, like I said, embarrassingly long for playing it so embarrassingly slow that literally anybody could play what I'm playing. If you played it those days and months, and then had those months and years working on those techniques leading up to that, there's absolutely nothing special about me. And it's the same thing, I think, with pretty much any performer. If you were to practice the exact same stuff that they practice or that we practice, you would be able to do that. It's just simple. I've heard many musicians say that. I was at a camp where Victor Wooten said the same exact thing. He's such a virtuoso on the bass guitar. He said the exact same thing. A baby could do this thing if they had big enough hands or something. So I just want to stress that when I'm working on this stuff, like that Tenor Madness thing, it was at the beginning, it was. And then 3 hours later. 3 days later. Okay, and then 3 weeks. You get the idea. Okay, I can keep going on. Nothing special up here. And if you guys were to witness me practice day after day, year after year, you'd be like, why is he talking to us? Like, I could do this 3 times faster than him. That's a big deal. But it doesn't matter. All that matters is if you put in the time. And how do you put in the time? You have to find ways to make it sustainable, where you want to do that, or you have systems set up where you will do that. And it especially gets tough when you're out of here. But you guys know, I hope the culture of this school is so that it's just very normal to practice, 4 hours, 5 hours a day. I hope it is like that. Because that's the only way when I was in high school, I wasn't practicing that much. I tried to do a little bit every day. But it wasn't until college, and I had these great teachers and these great ensembles, and it was kind of a thing where I noticed the best players are just spending 5 hours at least in a room. That's what you do. You want to be the best, that's all you have to do. And that's cool. That's very simple. So that's of course the secret. And once I started to piece together those particular 3 things, being able to do some percussive stuff on the sax, being able to do bass lines, interchanging it with melodies, that was when I started to get some vision, some clarity about what maybe my voice could be. I still didn't know at the time. I still had to test things out. I still wouldn't have imagined that I could play full hour or hour and a half concerts. Not until I really started going out there and experimenting with maybe playing in front of a band a couple songs, and then later on playing like a 4-song set, playing on the street a little bit, playing at a coffee shop. And over time I realized, as I'm also thinking about ways to connect with audience, or this is sounding too much the same, I need a little bit of humor. I wonder if I could sing and play, all these kind of things. I wonder if I could use my hands involved, watching guitar players that hit their instrument, realizing, I could put rings on my fingers, and particularly this right thumb is the only finger that's not pressing something on the sax. And so I could do that. Also watching, have you guys experimented with playing drums? Any of you guys? Super good. The more you're just playing any type of music, I think it makes you a better musician. But drums, obviously, it's going to make your time better, but it works on that whole, multitasking thing. And for a drummer, it's not weird to use literally all their limbs. And so I was like, I could probably get more sound if I use my foot, if I do a little bit. So kind of starting to combine all that stuff. That's the journey that I've been on lately, is just kind of see how far I can go acoustically. Maybe someday that voice will change, and I'm already kind of evolving by doing more collaborating and whatnot. But that's kind of been the journey that I've been on. Can I play another song for you guys?
Yes, please.
And if you guys have any questions, I know we've got 10 more minutes. I'll play this song. Please ask about any kind of entrepreneurship stuff or music stuff or saxophone stuff. And I'll do a tune where I sing. What's that?
I like a million questions.
Oh. Well, hopefully we can squeeze in at least
No worries.
one of those. All right. So I mentioned the singing thing, and you'll hear me do a lot more singing tonight. That was an influence by, kind of being jealous of like piano players or guitar players that can use the voice. And realizing that, yes, instrumental music speaks to people, but the voice can speak in a different way. And that was me kind of exploring that. You can be a little bit more literal with words, whether that's like program notes, you're describing what's happening in the piece, or literally singing. And so I wanted to kind of pursue that. And so this is a tune, I'll do a slightly shortened version, that I wrote maybe a year ago. It's about if you find yourself in a place you know you shouldn't be. It's called Run Away. We'll see when it's done. Let's see. 2, 3, 4. Clouds roll in, we start to spill, rain begins to pour. Water turn, eyes burn, never been here before. Leave me, you don't wanna be, run out in those waves. Stay here, it's pretty clear, coming out of escape. Run away. Run away. Run away. Run away. Get out while you can, my friend. Get out while it's clear. No matter where you go, my friend, just get the hell out of here.
Woo!
All right, but you're still here. You didn't hear the words of that song. What questions do you guys have?
I'll go ahead. So this has to do with like saxophone gear because I actually play that same mouthpiece that you play. I really love it.
Cool.
And I was just wondering like what was the process of like the gear that you picked with relation to all the extended techniques too? Because I know you use the Leger reeds too.
Yeah.
So was there any criteria that you went through to pick stuff that was best for what you did?
Yeah, so the main truth is that you can do any of the stuff that I'm playing. You can technically do on any type of setup.
Right.
even the thumb ring stuff, I mean, you could do on any sax. It is nice that this P. Moriat has a metal thumb hook, but really I'm just hitting on that hook, and you could replace that with any type hook, or you can see how short mine is. I actually did shave it down a little bit, but it keeps getting a little bit shorter every time, so I have to occasionally replace that. But yeah, so the truth is, I picked the gear mainly just for ease of play, what sounds best to me, kind of like any other sax player. It wasn't like it has to be this easy France, ligature, but it just works well. And so, maybe the biggest one that makes the biggest difference is probably the synthetic reed, the Leger
that's what I was
reed.
kind
Have you guys tried any synthetics before? Okay, not all synthetic reeds are created equal, but I truly believe Leger is at the top, where I think the signature Leger reed. There's other ones that are kind of crappy, like the Studio. Don't even mess with that. But the signature Leger, I think, is as good as any cane reed, but just lasts so much longer. The weather doesn't change it. It never warps over time. And then they're just so consistent one to the next. And that was the biggest reason I got this reed wasn't for the longevity. It was actually the consistency. I was like, where else in the world, in what other marketing thing, is it okay when you buy 10 of something and only 3 work?
Preach. Oh, yes.
You buy 10 Fords and only 3 of them will work. That's not good. But anyway, so these are all good. So that was my reasoning with that. And then this P. Moriat horn, I noticed it had kind of a nicer, a little easier to play the low end. I like the mechanics of kind of the new mechanics of a new horn, so that's kind of why I went with that. But otherwise, there are some things now that I've done, which at the concert tonight you'll see me using, where I've done a couple of modifications, like this strip here. Yeah. This is spoiling a little bit, and I added a second one down, a couple extras there, so you can't hear that. There's like a time where I'll get the audience to sing and I do this kind of stuff, and otherwise that might dent a little bit sooner. But I've kind of crossed to the dark side of some things that are like, you'll see this little F sharp alternate key, I kind of carved some ridges in, and now I'll do a song where I go. So yeah, like I said, I crossed over to the dark side. Nothing's off limits here. And if I did lose this saxophone, I'd realize, oh my gosh, I had changed so much.
Take some pictures.
Yeah.
Remember?
Exactly.
So I was thinking, just this is an observation, I was kind of thinking when you were talking about to coordinate the bass with the melody with the percussive stuff, right? It's like you're in like Logic or GarageBand, and you're like tracking drums.
Yeah.
You're choosing which 16th note gets that thing,
exactly.
Right? And you can only have one sound per matrix, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of like, so you're picking we listened to Chameleon in one of the classes today, like how you displace the lines.
Yeah, where are you going to put the melody note? You can't do it at the same time.
And so it's like a composition arranging gig too, and that you're thinking about how to coordinate this to make all 3 things come across, but you can't just do them as they are. You have to kind of embrace the creativity.
Yeah, the composition is huge for me. And I wish, like I said, I could just come up with all this stuff off the top of my head, or someone names a tune and I just, play like, piece of cake with the bass lines. It's not that easy. And I'm getting better at that because I've now done it for years. I'm used to like what it feels like to put the melody a 16th note ahead. But yeah, it's totally like that. And a lot of times I will write, I do a mixture of whether it's just kind of in my head, on my fingers, but when I first started out, a lot of writing it down. And a lot of times it'd just be on scratch paper where I would just write the letter names. And I'd say like, okay, so I know I have my 8th notes right here, and let's say I want, maybe I want a backbeat on 3 or something, right. My 8th notes, and so, okay, I got my C here, that's going to be slap tone, and then I'm going to jump up to an E flat there, that's the melody, and then I'll play the 5th here, and then go to a D there, there's my slap, and then I'll realize through double tonguing, I can actually play on a lot of like the upbeats of the 16th notes, and so I'll go like this. So I can throw in C's in between here, do that and a pop there, and then and I actually sell my sheet music to a lot of these tunes on my website, DerekBrownSax.com, and I started because now all my tunes have ring parts and stomping parts. So I have a second clef now.
Oh, cool.
With, you know,
I was going to ask about your notational thing. How much
yeah,
notes you write now?
whatever the rhythms are, you know, and then I'll have,
Nice.
and then whatever the stomp rhythms. And so that's kind of what it looks like now.
It's like a grand staff for solo sax.
Yeah, yeah, and then and also a lot of times I'll compose, and still to this day, I was just doing it a couple days ago, in a notational software program like Finale or something else. I use MuseScore because it's free.
Right.
Where I'll just like put in a bunch of 16th rests, and I just like and that was like what I did with when I did Every Breath You Take, which is early, so you guys know. It's very much da 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 on the downbeats, and so I can't do that. I can't do that at the same time. I realized I could play the bass line and then stop and then play the melody back and forth. But then I was like, I wonder if I can keep that bass line going the whole time because of double tonguing. If I could play, I see the clock here. I could play on the upbeats the melody. Now I'll have to move all the melody notes up a 16th note, kind of like what you're talking about, Camille. And so I go. Now obviously I don't want to do it with every song. That's going to sound a little bit too much. But so a lot of times I would say the biggest reason that I have kind of tried so many new things on the saxophone is because I write my stuff. If I was a classical sax player, it'd be I would just be reading other people's music, or if I'm just transcribing. But the fact that I'm writing my own music is challenging me to I wonder if it's possible to put that
to get more, and how would I get more?
So arranging, writing has been huge for me, kind of everything.
Very cool.
And I see we're out of time.
Chamber music starts in like 5 minutes. So So what I want to say tonight, 7:30 band room, super informal concert. I mean, just some chairs up with him on the side of the room. So it's not.
Bring your non-music friends.